I cannot believe that Arkham Knight prevents you from being able to watch the entire ending until you've found every single Riddler challenge. Maybe you just need to play something else. Yes, something that will make for a decent review. Yes, something that you can play quickly since you've wasted so much time since your last review. Jesus Christ, I get it! Terrors of the Library! Welcome once again to Terrors of the Library, where we pick up one of the unwanted donated games at my local library, the vagabonds of the games industry, and examine why their previous owners decided to throw the game out like expired milk. And today's subject is a game that I've gotten a few requests for, How to Train Your Dragon 2. I'm playing it on the Wii U because it's the only version that was at the library when I picked it up. Some people have been calling this game the Superman 64 of the new generation. That's quite a statement. Comparing this game to one of the worst games in recorded history seems a bit hyperbolic. Let's take a look. Oh, I get it now. Yep, the bulk of this game is you flying through rings. And not just flying through rings with a time limit or while racing against other characters. It's not the entire game, but it's more than half the game. That right there is enough reason to hate this pile of pus. Flying through rings is not fun. It's never been fun. There are only two places in video games where flying through rings is ever acceptable. The game's one training stage and Mario Party. It needs to be made international law that anybody who decides to make flying through rings a central gameplay mechanic should be subjected to the slap of a million exploding suns. It's not fun, and it therefore has no place in your video game. Flying through rings is the refuge of the developer who wants to make a flying game but is too creatively bankrupt to actually design levels or program cool shit to do in the flying game. Speaking on behalf of all gamers everywhere, we would rather have no video game at all than have one that sucks balls because you had zero ideas to build a game but decided to phone one in anyway. But you don't care about that, do you? We all know this game wasn't made out of artistic expression or to make a quality product. It was made because the first How to Train Your Dragon was a surprise smash hit, and you weren't going to let the cash cow go by again without taking your turn at milking at it, you goddamn leeches. But now that the game's most infamous problem is out of the way, let's talk about the other 999. The game doesn't have a story of any kind. You spawn in flying around the island of Berk where the movies take place. You fly to a beacon to trigger a training challenge, you complete it, the game doesn't care if you win it so long as you complete it, and you unlock the next one. Complete 4 training challenges and you unlock a tournament, which is 5 events against the other characters. Win the tournament and you unlock the next set of training challenges. You do this 4 times, so the game is short, and I mean really short. Like finish in an afternoon if you can stomach it that long short. The first challenge in the game is flying through rings, and I did horribly at this challenge because the tutorial that you're shown at the beginning of the game leaves out one slightly important detail. How to accelerate! Your character flies on their own, and I just kind of assumed that this was your normal movement speed since the game doesn't tell you otherwise. Nuh-uh. Flying at this normal speed results in you losing at everything, and the game doesn't see fit to tell you how to go more fast so that you can actually win shit. The second challenge is a shooting gallery where you have to shoot the Vikings. Okay, what the hell? The right shoulder button shoots fireballs when you're flying, but nothing's happening. None of the buttons are doing anything. I'm pushing every button on the controller, and nothing's happening. Is the game glitching out? No. The game just decided, for no reason and without telling me, that this shooting gallery is played from the Wii U's touchscreen. The first and only time the touchscreen is ever used for anything, and again, not mentioned in the tutorial. Would it really have been that hard to put up a text box saying use the touchscreen, or, you know, just stick to the damn buttons? The rental didn't come with an instruction booklet, and nobody's been dumb enough to bother making a walkthrough for this donkey's anus, so everything the game itself doesn't tell me is stuff I need to figure out on my own. But luckily all Wii U games have electronic manuals. I'll just look there for the controls and whatever else the tutorial left out. There's nothing here. Well, piss. The third training challenge is picking up sheep and dropping them into pens. The fourth is another course of rings. And it's all boring. Seriously, does this look like fun to you? And if it does, do the world a favor and stay off of Metacritic. Also, sterilize yourself while you're at it. So now it's time for the tournament, and the first event is, of course, flying through rings! Make that flying through rings while all of the other racers zoom ahead of you. Dude, seriously, I have my accelerate button held down as hard as I can. I'm not hitting anything, crashing, or otherwise horrendously screwing up. So why am I pretty much stuck in last place? I can't gain ground on anybody. Part of the problem is you fall off your dragon every time you hit something, and you have to wait about 3 seconds to respawn, and hitting something includes another racer colliding into you when they pass you. You'll just out of nowhere be sent flying off your dragon every freaking time you get past. Look at this, I can barely keep up with the dude in second to last place. How the hell do you expect me to win? I can't even shoot the enemies with the fireballs because your fireballs are so ineffective. If I land several hits, the enemy will slow down enough to overtake them, but they'll still pass me seconds later because I'm so damn slow. There's no way to win this. Everybody is faster than me by default, and there's no way for me to go any faster. I thought for certain that I was doing something wrong, like maybe all the other enemies zoomed so far ahead of me because you're supposed to buff your dragon or do challenges to increase your speed. How else can they expect you to win when you're slower than everyone else? But no, there's a much simpler explanation for why I'm doing so bad. After 2 failed attempts to suck nards at this race, I decided to try one of the other dragons, even though none of them have blue eyes nor are any of them white. You can play as any of the 5 main characters and their respective dragons from the first movie, and you're not given any stats or information about any of them. I decided to switch to this dragon named Hookfang, and I tried the tournament again. Not only did I win the race, I curb stomped the other players. I took an early lead and got so far ahead that I never saw any of the enemies ever again. Compare this to when I was playing as Toothless, when I couldn't gain ground on anybody for more than a few seconds. In fact, after the race, I noticed that Toothless always came in last place. It seems that Toothless is by far the slowest dragon in the game, while Hookfang is, if not the fastest, then damn close to it. The characters are so unbalanced that Toothless racing Hookfang is like Joe Swanson racing the Flash. Doesn't matter how skilled a driver he is, he just doesn't have any chance. It's actually a pretty devious trap. The game starts you out playing as Toothless, and you want to play as him because he's the main character from the movie, and then you get wrecked. Anyway, the tournament. The first event is a race through a course of rings. Every ring that you miss greatly reduces your speed. The game gives you a little leeway to miss one, but missing more than that will make you move at a snail's pace. What irritates me is that these races have you run the same course of rings for multiple laps, but you're not told how many laps or what lap you're on. You'll never know how close you are to the end. The second event, you fly around shooting targets. If you pay close attention to the enemies, they all seem to shoot at the exact same targets at the exact same time, almost like they're all programmed to shoot the same targets in one predetermined order. Because who needs AI, am I right? So it's worth mentioning that you can only fire 6 fireballs before your dragon needs to recharge, and it takes freaking forever to recharge. And Toothless recharges a bit faster than Hookfang. It's clear that certain dragons are geared towards certain challenges, like Toothless has an advantage in the shooting challenges while Hookfang is much better at racing, but there is one shooting event per tournament, and all of the other events are races. Toothless won't make up enough points from the shooting challenge to make up for losing everywhere else. You can't give the characters different skills and then stack the events so that only one skill is of any use. The third event is flying through rings. The fourth event is flying through rings while picking up sheep. The first player to pick up 10 sheep wins, but you can find black sheep that are worth 5 points, and the enemies never go after the black sheep because they're programmed to do nothing except go through the course of rings and never stray from it. All you need to do is go after the black sheep when it gets marked on your map, and you'll automatically get first place. Seriously, you're making a game about flying dragons, and you turn not once, but twice to picking up sheep for the main gameplay. How does that even cross your mind? How do you even watch either of those movies and your takeaway is sheep? And guess what the fifth event is? Seriously, I'll give you 3 guesses what the fifth event is. Another course of rings, because we needed more rings. The controls suck ass. Flying like normal is pretty responsive, but the problem kicks in whenever you need to fly straight up or straight down, which later in the game they put at least one stretch of rings that are straight up or straight down, specifically for this purpose per race. The game tries to emulate real-world physics by having you fly slower when you fly up and fly faster if you're angled downward, but if you try to fly too steeply downward, your dragon just all of a sudden nosedives down with this huge burst of speed, so if you miss a turn and you accidentally face downward when trying to turn around, you just go hurtling off in the wrong direction. Normally, moving the control stick left or right turns your dragon left or right, but if your dragon is in the middle of a dive, moving left or right instead rotates your dragon. The controls completely change out of nowhere. Same happens if you're going straight up, because the game can't tell the difference between up and down. But that's not the worst part. Moving the control stick up and down does not have you climb or drop in relation to the camera. They make you climb or drop in relation to your dragon's position. So if your dragon rotates while diving, or God help you because the controls are ass, flips upside down when trying to make a sharp turn, your controls completely reverse. Up moves down and down moves up, and I remind you that not only is the vast majority of the game flying through rings that are smaller than you are, which requires precise controls, but you're also racing against people. If the game's attempt at a physics engine reverses your controls and sends you completely off course, then enjoy the views of the other dragons' asses, because you'll be in last place. Plus, the camera doesn't always keep your character centered, or it angles to a little more of an overhead view, which leaves you uncertain exactly where you need to go to hit the rings in the first place. So after you beat the first tournament, you begin unlocking some new training challenges. The first set of challenges was rings, shooting gallery, sheep, and more rings. What's the second round of training challenges? Rings, shooting gallery, sheep, and more rings. No, I'm not kidding. They recycle the exact same training minigames, just with slight differences to the level layout. Every single set of training challenges is exactly the same. Not only were these guys so devoid of creativity, so lacking in craps to give, that they resorted to flying through rings and picking up sheep for the entirety of the gameplay, but they actually resorted to repeating the exact same stupid minigames over and over again. The tournaments? Every single tournament has the exact same 5 events in the exact same order. This is the laziest game I've ever seen. This is unbelievable. Did they make this game in one day? Did they have any ideas for what to put into the game, or did they just sit down, just render the island, and then call it a day? How in the actual hell could the pitch meeting for this game have possibly gone? We're going to make a game where you fly dragons! Great, so what will you do on the dragons? Duh, fly them! No, I mean, what will you do while flying the dragons? I don't understand the question. I'm pretty sure that they didn't see either of the How to Train Your Dragon movies. At this point, I'd be surprised if they read a plot synopsis of either movie before sitting down to program this. This belongs with those god-awful shat-out-in-a-week indie games on Steam, not in stores selling for $60! When you're not doing painfully not fun training events or tournaments, you can just fly around the island exploring. There are several side objectives to do, like collecting 50 tokens for each dragon, trekking down ice sculptures to melt, flying under all of the stone arches on the island with absolutely no indication of which ones you've done and which ones you haven't. All boring crap like that. And I ignored all of the side quests because there's no reward for completing any of them. If you can't be bothered to give me a reason to do your side quests, then I'm not going to be bothered to waste my time doing them. Strangely, the best time that I have with this game is just flying around and casually exploring the island. It's not exactly fun because there's nothing substantial to do, but it's kind of relaxing. The scenery is nice. Doing it doesn't make you hate life. That's pretty sad when the best part of the game is when you're not actively playing it. The third tournament is where the game really dives into bullshit from an Olympic regulation diving board. See, every time that you fly through a blue ring, you get an item, and yet another thing the tutorial doesn't tell you is how to freaking use items. One item is a bucket that you throw and it dismounts the victim from their dragon, which forces you to wait about 3 full seconds to respawn. Another item is an anchor that you throw and it pulls you down and it pretty much stops you from moving for the same 3 seconds. Yet another item is, I don't know, a snake that you throw at an enemy and it freezes them in place for 3 or 4 seconds, and you can get this item in groups of 3. All of these items track players like homing missiles. They hit you completely without warning and with 0 chance to dodge them, and you can already see exactly where this is going. Once you get to the third race, you can't go 15 goddamn seconds without getting nailed from one of these 3 items that paralyzes you for so long that you're pretty much guaranteed to immediately drop to last place, and there isn't shit you can do to avoid it. It's like the red shells in Mario Kart cranked up to 1,000,000 and it never freaking stops! Because the only thing better than racing through rings is racing through rings while getting punched in the face every couple of seconds! Oh, but it gets better! See, every now and then one of the enemies will shout out, "Viking Blitz!" And out of nowhere you get chucked off your dragon and have to wait to respawn. I have no idea what the Viking Blitz is, but it involves another rider leaping off their dragon, tackling you in midair, and magically jumping off of air to land back on their dragon. And the AI does this every time that it doesn't have an item but feels like attacking you anyway.
Viking Blitz!
Cock! Jesus! Anti-life justifies my hate. Anti-life justifies my hate! I tried to do the Viking Blitz. I pressed every button. Every combination of buttons. I never got the move to work a single time. I don't know if you can do the Viking Blitz and it's yet another thing the most useless tutorial in history doesn't tell you, or if it's a special attack only the AI can do when it doesn't feel like you've been screwed recently enough. I guess that I can't blame the developers after all. The game would never crack 3 hours long unless the enemy started cheating like they're in a Yu-Gi-Oh game.
Viking Blitz!
Shit! No! Fuck!
Inhale my dong enragement child.
Actually, I went back and looked at the footage I recorded of the tutorial, and this is something that you need to see. Keep an eye on the top of the screen. Did you see that? What was that hint that appeared at the top of the screen for literally less than half of a second? Oh look! Do the Viking Blitz by pressing X! Except I did press X. I pressed it several times, and the damn thing still didn't work. These attacks all home in on enemies, so your only hope of dodging any of this crap is to do this dodge roll maneuver, but the dodge roll is mapped to the Y button, which is across from the accelerate button. The only way to press it is to take your finger off the accelerator, and tell me, does that sound even remotely like a good idea? You need your thumb on the accelerator at all times, and you pretty much need your finger on the shoulder buttons too. There does not exist a way to hold the controller so that you can operate all three of these buttons at once, and even if you could use the dodge button comfortably at any time, you don't even get a split-second warning before any of these items hit you. Unless you develop psychic powers, your only option to dodge them is to just use the dodge button constantly, which you can't do because you can't roll to the side constantly while flying through rings! Pretty much the only way to win the races in the 3rd and 4th tournaments is to get such a huge lead that none of the enemies can attack you. Get lucky and go long enough without being found in the Alps that you get far enough ahead of the second player that they're out of range to hit you. This makes Toothless and the other slower characters even more useless than they already were, because Toothless can barely keep up with anybody flying unhindered, let alone flying with heat-seeking missiles being chucked at him every few seconds. This does not feel like challenge. Challenge can be overcome with adequate skill. This feels like luck, and luck is just bullshit. The trick that the enemies pull out in the 4th tournament is that the enemies will automatically dodge every single item that you chuck at them, so the only attack you have is the fireball, which doesn't really do much. The enemies also get a lot more speed boost items, so if you fall behind, you're more likely to stay behind. It's just the same crappy excuse for gameplay, just with yet another cheat thrown in to make you miserable. Also, I'm just putting this out there, there were 2 times in the entire game where the controls glitched out so that I could not use any items. Both of them occurred during this last tournament. Controls worked perfectly fine until now. Game cheats! I'm honestly curious, what could the ending of this game possibly be like? There's no story at all. Is there some trophy ceremony to crown you the king of ring flying? What?
And the crowd goes wild!
Oh yeah!
Putting up absolutely no resistance.
Of course, there is no ending. The game just continues without any more events to select. Why start caring now? I read on GameFAQs that the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions have an achievement for beating some douche named Valka in a race, so it sounds like there is some secret final boss, but I am too bored and too pissed off to give half a stool sample about trying to find him. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is one of the most lazily made games that I have ever seen. There was not a single actual idea went into this game. No story, gameplay that doesn't even sound like there's a dimension in the multiverse where it could possibly be considered fun, hideously short, the game cheats in lieu of having decent design or difficulty. There was not a single moment in the entire game where I was genuinely enjoying myself. Calling it the current generation Superman 64 is way too far, but calling it shit is way too nice. So call it whatever you want. I call it the new threshold for most shameless cash grab licensed games I've ever seen. This wasn't made by Activision, Ubisoft, none of the usual suspects. This was made by Taurus Games, the people who make all those licensed games that you don't even notice because you take one look at them and they just look so generic that they don't even register as existing on the shelf. It took Taurus Games a long time to get on my radar, but now you've got my attention. Right below Titus, Player One, Ubisoft, and Bright Light, welcome to the official DLJ shit list!